if I could just even take a step back and say, where do we approach venture from? So fundamentally, we approach venture from a posture of support. We really started this firm out of a need. We heard a problem that these entrepreneurs had. So let's come alongside and solve this problem. Let's help you founders get to where you need to be in order to scale your venture. So that to me colors how everything that we do, I guess. We understand like we are coming alongside in a support posture. How can we help you grow? And then deciding on, of course, what's a wise decision, but what's a founder and a product and a market that we believe in.
Imagine having direct access to someone who's navigated life's toughest terrains and come out stronger. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with empathy, experience, and honesty. This isn't just advice. It's a lifeline, a strategy session, a chance to learn from my journey so you can accelerate yours. Without the ability to be self-aware and introspective, the ability for you to get to where you want to go, nearly impossible. Hey everybody, welcome back to the David Guttman podcast. I have a really interesting guest today, Kelly Reeser, like Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Anyway, so right now I know you're going to be rebranding soon, but you guys are the tech farm where you guys are basically raising funds and have raised funds to invest in small startups, right? Mm-hmm. Do I have that about right?
You got it. You got it. Tech Farms Capital is the capital arm of a broader brand. So my partner runs a firm called Tech Farms, which is a physical location for entrepreneurs. And we are the capital arm where we invest in early stage, high growth technology companies.
Well, I definitely want to get into some of that in a little bit about kind of how you evaluate companies and management teams and things like that. But before we do that, I just want to go a little bit back and kind of talk a little bit about kind of growing up and kind of what got you interested in getting into the entrepreneurial realm in the first place.
Absolutely, yes. I am born and raised Pensacola, Florida, and had the opportunity to do undergrad in at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. I was able to go on a leadership scholarship, which then just opened a lot of doors and opportunities just to see the world beyond, as we would say in Pensacola, my neck of the woods. And so was able to, again, have opportunities, make friendships, build relationships with people that were just, had perspectives different than my own. I was on a scholarship called the Hunt Leadership Scholarship, and we had a cohort that we traveled, again, our 4 years together. Part of the scholarship was the opportunity to study abroad. And so I spent the fall of my junior year in Spain, studying art history at the Prado Museum and just getting a fantastic opportunity to see the world, again, beyond what I had grown up with. And that definitely expanded my horizons. Jumping back just real quick, high school, funny story, and I only say this because it's become important as I've developed as a professional. My husband and I both graduated high school together. We were voted our senior year best all around in our senior class, which is a fun superlative to have. And also we found that it's kind of been the curse of our lives, where it's like, you are good at a lot of things, but great at nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So that was, as I was going through my studies, as I was going through what do you do with the rest of your life, I found that this idea of there were so many things that maybe I could do, not one thing that I was great at. And I just kind of had struggled with that through my 20s. Like, what is life supposed to be for me? So again, the traveling, opening up all the opportunities, I found myself a little bit maybe paralyzed by the angst of my 20s of making the decision of what should life look like? How do I decide on one thing? And so I tried a lot of things. So I majored in Spanish and Latin American studies. I have a minor in chemistry because I thought for a while I was going to be a doctor. Pursued the travels beyond the study abroad opportunity. Found myself in graduate school in Buenos Aires, Argentina, studying development management and public policy. And again, meeting some fascinating people along the way that really only make sense in hindsight. And so looking back, I was telling you this story earlier where I was able to work for essentially what I didn't realize at the time was a family office in Buenos Aires with some of the wealthiest families in the region, and getting to work with them on establishing, I think he was establishing a nonprofit to have investment connections between the Arab Gulf and South America. So again, in hindsight, what an amazing opportunity that I was right in the middle of and maybe didn't even realize it at the time. But when my husband's job brought us back to Pensacola, my big question was, what do you do with a degree in international development and public policy, really with an emphasis at the federal
In
policy making
Pensacola.
level in Pensacola? And so our journey kind of took us to, or took me to professionally working in economic development, which really was as perfect as it could be in a city our size or community our size, because I found myself at the intersection of the business community and the government. So we were government funded, county, city, taxpayer dollars funded our organization, but we were advocating on behalf of the business community. And then that's where I began working with entrepreneurs.
Well, it's funny. You talk about your angst, and I was a little surprised. I mean, I was having a conversation with my daughter who's 25, maybe, I don't know, 3 months ago. And I was asking her for her thoughts and input on some of the content that I'm creating. And she said, you really should do some content around kind of like not feeling left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And her comment it surprised me, which is she's like, now, I think because of social media and everything being so curated, that people have this overwhelming sense of, oh, I'm so behind everybody else, because they're seeing this curated highlight reel of that isn't necessarily a reflection of what's actually reality.
Right.
Even worse than when we were growing up, although I'm a bit older than you, but grew up in a similar time. Well, so maybe where did the bug come to do the traveling? Because, I think it's much more common. People coming from a place like Pensacola would be less likely to spread their wings in that way. Was it something like your mom and dad really encouraged you to do?
Sure. I'll blame it on the great stories that my grandmother told. So my paternal grandmother, my dad's mom, was, she grew up in South America. And so again, as people, as they get older, as they tend to do, they tell the same stories over and over again. So if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times growing up. Her stories of life in Lima, Peru. And she said, Kelly, you must visit Machu Picchu one day. And I remember doing a second grade project where I constructed Machu Picchu out of little blocks of wood. Or there just was always this intrigue and allure to South America. So again, she'd lived maybe 10 years in Lima, but had grown up in Argentina, and kind of the glory days, maybe the pre-Peronista glory days of Argentina, where everything was glamorous glamorous
Right.
of the 1920s in Argentina. And she would again tell me stories of her life growing up, and the love story of her meeting my grandfather. He was a pilot with Eastern Pan American, flying the South America route for the international airlines. So again, in my childhood imagination, it became this very glamorous existence. And so I, again, would consider myself a kind of person that attempts to just make life happen. So I'd have these crazy dreams, and I'm like, let me figure out how to do that, and how to go there, how to get there. And I believe it was junior year of college, based on the scholarship that I was on, I was able to apply for this fellowship opportunity. So I drafted a research proposal and then got funded to spend basically spent half the summer in Lima, or in Peru, and half the summer in Argentina.
Wow.
And so definitely just part of it was figuring out how to make it happen. Was how to get funded, how to get, how to justify being in overseas for any length of time. So then again, going back to graduate school, it just felt natural to find some place that was going to be not only a good educational experience, but a good experience.
Right. Now you have 3 children, 8, 10, and 12, if I remember.
Correct.
And your oldest is a girl, and your 2 youngest are boys, if I got that right.
That's right.
So maybe, as they're still young, although, you could argue your oldest isn't so far away from, maybe going to college. Maybe talk a little bit about how you see, and I definitely want to get into the entrepreneurship stuff, but I feel like there's a lot of overlap, or there should be more overlap between how you exist as an individual, and that includes your romantic relationships, the kind of parent you are, and not just the kind of professional that you are. So maybe talk a little bit about kind of how you think about your children's journey. Do you think they'll go to college? Do you think that they'll, travel the world, and how much of it's like you kind of pointing them in the right direction and versus letting them find their own way?
Sure, absolutely. My husband and I consider ourselves very intentional parents, as in we love being parents and we do put a lot of time, energy, and effort into it, not in a crafted or scripted way, but we just want to be present with our kids. And so I would say any working mom would know the term work-life balance. And I think for many, many years, work-life balance was always like presented as the goal. It's like, you got to find a good work-life balance. And I think that that I prefer the term, and actually have seen it trending much more in the direction of what does work-life blend look like? Like, don't make them competing forces in your life. And I think that is coming from a position of privilege, admittedly, that, that my husband and I have had that opportunity to be able to allow our work life and our home life to be not competitive, but complementary. And so I'd say that the work-life blend, what that looks like in our family is, I love what I do professionally. And so that becomes dinner table conversation. In addition to, how was practice? How's your homework going? How did that test go? Oh, we invested in a company that makes guitar foot pedals.
Right.
And so that has lent itself to, my 10-year-old just the other day was like, Mom, how's that guitar foot pedal company coming that we're invested in? And so it's like he feels, and they feel very much a part of the journey. And I think that it's, I don't recall. It's funny, Dave, thinking back about, my childhood. I have amazing parents, wonderful. I don't recall conversations at home around the dinner table about their work, though. I couldn't have told you when I graduated high school. I knew my dad worked it was a Monsanto, it was a chemical plant. I knew that he was an engineer there, but I couldn't tell you what he did. Like, it just wasn't a part of just daily conversation. But this was when, and again, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the firm, but when I first started raising capital from LPs for our venture capital fund, I remember my kids would ask, well, Mommy, did you get a new investor today? Mommy, did you get, some days it was, yes, so-and-so wrote a check, or yes, I had 3 meetings moving that direction. And I remember coming home one day, and I don't know if I must have been long-faced or defeated somehow, but I was like, no, buddy, I didn't get any new investors today. He's like, Mommy, I want to be an investor in your fund. And so all 3 kids, and this was, like I said, years ago, so minus their ages, and they ran off, and they ended up coming back to the table, and like on the kitchen table, Dave, they had found, maybe they had reserves, $152.56. And they said,
Wow.
Mommy, we want to be an investor in your fund. And I was like,
by the way, I have a new name for your new firm. It should be $152.56. LLC should be that should be the name of your firm.
Absolutely.
That is so adorable.
Oh, it was beautiful. And they're on the spreadsheet. I mean, the envelope of money is still sitting on my counter or on my dresser in my bedroom as a reminder that my children believe in me, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. And that is absolutely the greatest investor I could have ever had.
Wow. And, it's funny. I remember, because you're right. I would have conversations with my daughter when she was like in middle school or in high school. And I guarantee if you had asked her what I do for a living, she would say nothing. He just tells people what to do. And then, because I remember I would ask her like, oh, what does Bobby's parents do, or what does Michelle's parents do? And she'd be like, I don't know. Like, she had zero curiosity about it, which always struck me as odd. And because I'm kind of like you, which is, in fact, my daughter gives me a hard time because almost all of my close friends are either people that I work with currently, have worked with in the past, have had some kind of professional. Because again, to me, it's like, if I don't enjoy the people I'm doing work with, then
It really
That's
feels
what
like
they
work.
run,
It feels a
right?
lot less like work if you actually like the people you're doing it with.
Absolutely, and enjoy and then find purpose in the work that you do. So I think I looking back, though, I would say my resume or that best all around curse that I jokingly say
Right.
that I have, um, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. It's
Yeah.
like one building block leads to the next. Again, like from a faith perspective, my husband, I would say, like, God wastes nothing. Every turn in your journey is for a reason and for a purpose, and it is building this bigger, broader tapestry that is life. And I agree. It's fun to pause at times and look back and say, I would have never. You can't draw a straight line to have gotten here, but I wouldn't change an element of the journey.
Now, we didn't talk about it at all off camera, but since you bring it up, have you always had faith, or is that something you came to later in life?
Yeah. So it growing up in the South in the United States. Church is a part of community. It's a pretty common thing. A lot of people um, happen upon church as an element of community, and so I would say second grade ish is when my parents started taking us to church. And I would say for me, it became real and something more than just a club or an activity in middle school, and that it definitely became the cornerstone of who I am. And you could say combination of motivation and moral compass and raison d'être, I guess, like reason for being, like why do we do the things we do? My husband had a similar journey of finding faith in middle school, and I think that has been, just again the cornerstone of our marriage, as well as how we want to raise our children and how we want to spend just our time, just day in day out. What we do is motivated and influenced by that.
And with your children, then, are you letting them find their own path in the same way that you did?
Yeah, I would say that church is a big part. My husband his employment is in the church, but we have also been very careful. And I would say we want it to be something that they see us authentically living out. Because I
Mm,
think when you have, we never wanted them to see a disconnect between the people in our home, who
right.
we were in our house, and who we were, the face that we were putting out to the rest of the world. Again, my husband's been a youth pastor as professionally our whole marriage. And so a lot of times what happens is if you have a face that is for the public and then you have a face interior to your home, and if those two are different, I think that's when children get confused as to what's really going on. But absolutely, we want to present them with the ability, of course, to make their own decisions and the perspective that goes far beyond one little neck of the woods, one
Right.
little part of the world, and we want to travel that journey together right alongside them.
Well, you bring up, you didn't use the word, but it's what I think about based on what you described. It's about authenticity, and which will be a segue to talking about the professional stuff in a
Mhm.
second. But I think it's interesting. Like I try very, very hard that there's just really one version of me, not one version
Mhm.
with my daughter and one version with my wife and one version with people that I work with professionally, to just be me. And that's harder to do than I think. It's weird. It's hard to do and it's easy to do at the same time. How do you sort of help your children navigate that other than by example, which I think is probably the best way?
Yeah, yeah. Lead by example. Yes, absolutely. I think that. I think that. I mean, I don't know that I could have a better answer than they see us struggle, they see us happy, they see us sad.
Mm,
We've tried not to. My husband and I aren't fighters. Like we don't bicker, so it's not necessarily that some couples choose to fight out, side of the presence. So it's not that we try to hide anything from our children. We just want to
right.
live our lives who we are authentically in front of them, and then encourage them to do the same. We're just now, my daughter just finished sixth grade. So I would say the last 2 years, fifth grade was kind of middle school light. Sixth grade was true middle school. And I think walking with them through of course, there's emotions, there's hormones, there's all the things that you're changing and you're growing as you enter middle school. And I think you're finally getting to that point of consciousness around who do I want to be? What image do I want to portray? And we want it to go beyond just the Disney version of follow your heart and be who you,
Right.
be your true self. But there's also some truth in that. And I think that we have tried to root them and ground them in the fact that God has made them uniquely, specifically, intentionally, purposefully with their skills, gifts, physical abilities, and you lean into that and you be that authentic self who you're created to be.
So let's use that authenticity as the pivot to some of the stuff. So in your first fund, if I remember correctly, $5 million. How many companies did you invest in?
Sure. So we set out to professionalize access to capital for early stage technology founders. So we raised $5.6 million from 82 investors across
including the
region.
$251.26 or whatever.
$156.52. Yes. $52.56. Yes. So including that, yes, absolutely. And then we have deployed all of that capital across 20 early stage companies. And so smallest check was $50,000, biggest check was $500,000. And so we've, again, fully deployed that capital, have raised a few other sidecar funds for our portfolio companies specifically to kind of help them grow, bridge the gap. And then we're launching our second fundraise.
Have any exits from those first 20? Not yet.
No, we invest early stage. Okay. And so typically it's a 5 to 7 year window.
Okay. And how long ago was the first investment?
So goodness, the first fund closed March 14th of 2023.
Oh, okay. So recent.
So a couple of investments prior to close, but for the most part, we're still in that nurture window.
Sure. So now talk a little bit about what you're looking for, because that 50,000 to $500,000, that's quite a broad range. Mm-hmm. And obviously, even within that means that where those companies are is also pretty diverse. Maybe talk a little bit about what you look for in the investment, and then specifically about the leadership of the people running that investment.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I'll lean into a little bit more of the Fund 2 thesis, because I think what we've done is taken the learnings from Fund 1 and crafted a much more thoughtful instrument. Because I think when we first started investing, we wanted to leave all of our options open because we weren't sure what deals we were going to find. Mm-hmm. We weren't sure exactly what we were going to encounter as we began to invest. And so the thesis centered around Fund 2 has a much heavier ownership target. So we are targeting between 5 and 10% ownership into these companies, into these investments that we make. We'll make $500,000 to $1 million investments in order to achieve those goals. Because what we've found is I have a very technical team, right? So we're going to do a lot of due diligence up front, technical diligence as well as diligence on the founding team. And we were doing the same amount of diligence on a company for a $50,000 check as we would for a $500,000 check. So you're getting, 3 or 4% ownership or 5% ownership with your $500,000 check, and you're getting 1.2% ownership. So the math works better when you target a higher level of ownership, which again, it typically equals a larger check size. But for the level of effort and diligence that our team puts in, we know that that's where we need to be. And so again, $500,000, $1 million check sizes. We call, another learning is that our team really enjoys a hardware component, which anyone familiar with venture capital in the last 25 years, software has eaten the world, right? Yeah. It's all, the majority of my counterparts are venture investors in the Southeast. They would say, if you're at $1 million ARR enterprise SaaS, we'll look at you. That's what the fund is geared towards, because those are very known metrics. You can understand the dynamics and what capital is needed to grow and scale those companies. And in software, you're really looking at infinite scalability. And so hardware has a hard time competing on margins, on scalability, on cost of capital expenditures needed to grow to the next level, that sort of thing. So we found, as we were looking at both what is the skill set internal to our team, as well as what is the gap in the marketplace, we're really leaning into this AI-enabled hardware concept where software is still crucial, but where does software intelligence meet physical innovation? How are you deploying a physical object at a point of implementation, call it a sensor. Let's put a sensor at a point of implementation. You're gathering data, you're building this unique proprietary set of data, and then you're layering your AI or your intelligence on top of that proprietary data set. And then you've got a defensible moat where a company can't come in and easily repeat that. So, those are the types of companies that we're really leaning into for our second fund.
And geographic focus still?
No, we're going to spread. We're definitely spreading the geography. With a smaller fund, you don't have all the money to travel to all the coasts, right?
Yeah.
So we had to limit. Our networks primarily lie in the Southeast. There will be, and it's not a written preference, but we are, of course, our heartstrings are in the Southeast. So there is definitely some level of comfort with the types of companies being built in the region, but absolutely we're looking beyond our regional borders, and really we even have entertained some international conversations. So companies building in our sweet spot.
So now, if there's 20-ish companies in your first fund, and just doing the rough math from what you were saying, the checks you're going to write, something like 20 in your second.
Right.
That's a lot of portfolio companies.
Sure is.
Are you planning to scale up your team in order to be able to manage that, I would think?
We have, and I think that is that's the part that I am fundamentally very excited about. It's one thing to build a fund and to bring that capital in and deploy that capital. It's another thing to build a firm where there's lasting power, where you're building in systems and processes that are repeatable and scalable in a very in a very non-scalable environment, right? So we're a services business at our core. And so we have gone from, there were three of us, three general partners in the first fund, and we've grown that partnership team. So we've brought in some expertise in the manufacturing space and the hardware space. We brought our legal counsel in-house. So there are now 7 of us in the boat rowing in the same direction. And also, again, using wisely some software tools where we can automate some of those processes, because I agree it's hard enough to feel like you're herding cats when you take 20 portfolio companies trying to get information from them every quarter, or move them, make sure you're monitoring progress as they're moving forward. And I agree on doubling that. Well, it's almost impossible.
How much of it is, because again, like it said, like in some cases when you're writing a smaller check, you have a very small equity percentage of the total. I mean, do you guys have board positions in many of these? And I mean, how much of it's you providing guidance in addition to capital?
Sure. So if I could just even take a step back and say, where do we approach venture from? So fundamentally, we approach venture from a posture of support. So the first half of my career, I worked in economic development and I managed an incubator. So my partner, Steve, similarly, he founded several tech companies, exited very successfully, but then put his personal money to work through managing an incubator. And so we started this firm out of a need. We heard a problem that these entrepreneurs had. So let's come alongside and solve this problem. Let's help you founders get to where you need to be in order to scale your venture. So that to me colors how everything that we do, I guess. So we come to the table not in a if you've talked to a founder that has taken on venture capital, there's oftentimes this superiority where we're coming in, you need me, I don't need you. But I would say from a mindset perspective, we understand like we are coming alongside in a support posture. How can we help you grow? And then deciding on, of course, what's a wise decision, but what's a founder and a product and a market that we believe in. If you've heard, I think it's Reid Hoffman is quoted as saying that building a startup is like jumping off a cliff and constructing the airplane on the way down. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's beautiful imagery of the risk that the founder is taking. And so what we feel like is the stratotanker, that VC really should be the stratotanker, which is the fuel plane, the fuel jet that comes alongside as that founder is constructed just enough that we can just inject a little more fuel to help you get on to the next element of your journey. So the posture of support, how do we help a founder on a journey that they're already on? For us, that typically looks like a post-prototype investment. And then how do you get to that first run of production?
So how many boards do in your first 20 are you guys sitting on?
So we have, again, the three of us, we sit on 2 technical advisory boards. I have a couple of board observer seats in addition to a one board seat.
Got it.
Yeah. So typically it's information rights that
Mhm.
that are standard, and then board seats if depending on the size of the company and where we
Got it.
can fit in.
Well, so now talk a little. So how are you finding the deals, or how are the deals finding you?
Yes. Great question. Because I would say, again, venture is still very much a relationship driven business, kind of a boutique industry. It's not huge. And so as we've grown our network, as we've developed relationships with other funders, with other entrepreneurial support programs, now that we are, again, investing along this thesis of hardware, for the most part, people are calling us with their best deals saying, hey, this is awesome robotics company. We can't do it. We can't touch it. But hey, we'd love to introduce you. And so there's a lot of inbound movement of, because really people like to help other people, right? So they meet a great founder and there's like, hey, there's something there. There's a spark there. But based on their own investment theses, they can't touch it, or they can't invest in that deal, or they need someone to come alongside and invest. And so we're getting a lot of inbound deal flow that way. We've got some relationships with research institutions where it's like, hey, we'll absolutely look at the deals or look at the technologies that are coming out of your research portfolio. So it's a mixed bag, but it's definitely this combination of our personal networks and growing in that space.
So it sounds like in almost all cases they're pre-revenue. Is that fair? Or
no, it's not. Again,
Okay.
it's in the first fund. In the first fund, it was very much a mixed bag, so half and half probably, where some pre-revenue. In every case, there's got to be some early traction, whatever that is. You've talked to enough customers where, yes, there is demonstrable need in the marketplace. This isn't just you having a cool widget or cool product. There is some need in the marketplace, and you can point us to your first handful of customers. And then other cases, revenue is, hey, this is my first $100,000 check, or depends on, again, the product and how that's being, the business model and how it's being sold.
Now, do you have I'm guessing you have an investment committee where maybe it's the three of you, where you
Initially,
basically,
yes.
and does it have to be unanimous? Does it have to be?
It's never not been
Okay.
unanimous. I think
That's interesting.
it is, right? But there are caveats where it's like, I want to be on record not loving this deal, but I'll
Got
go
it.
with it because there's conviction on the side of the other team.
So I'm reserving the right to say I told you so
I'm
later.
reserving the right, and I really want. There were a couple of moments where I just really wanted the "I told you so" moment, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we, Dave, something that I didn't mean to skirt, but I definitely never talked about the founders. Like, so what are we looking for in a team?
Well, actually, before you answer that, though, as part of that, what are the 3 green flags? Clearly, the founder would be one of them, I would assume. The 3 green flags, and I'm sure there's 10, 20, but the 3 most important green flags to you, like, this is a deal I really want to put some effort and energy into looking at.
Yeah. So there's every VC has some more alliterative than others, but has some level of like outline or framework for how they make decisions. And ours are T's. So Team TAM Tech are my top 3.
Sorry,
Team TAM Tech. So team.
Okay, total addressable market, right?
Yep. So team, of course, in the early stages when you're pre-traction, pre-revenue, 60 to 70% of your decision has to be on the team. Like, is this team able, whether it's this product or not, is this team able to pivot or do what's needed in order to get to market with something successfully? So team, and then TAM, of course, is your total addressable market. And that's just reversing into, a lot of founders have said, well, I don't understand why VCs are only chasing these $1 billion markets. Well, and again, it's the simplicity of the math where, if you have $1 billion market and you address the proverbial 1%,
Right.
then you're a $10 million company, and then you can start entertaining at least exit conversations. And so it has to be a huge, huge opportunity if you're assuming that you're only going to address that smaller percentage. The caveat there is, again, if you're positioned uniquely enough to capture 60 to 80% of a smaller market, well, goodness, that's definitely
one of the things I think that's lost on a lot of founders that haven't had exits before is they don't understand the concept that there still needs to be money on the table for an exit for them. So that if you've already squeezed all the juice out of the orange and there's nothing left for an acquirer, it makes exiting much harder.
Sure.
You need to be able to say to an acquirer, hey, look, we've gotten to here. Here are all the things we haven't had a chance to do yet that you can do once you acquire us and pay us this great exit value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where, again, that it feels infinite. It's not infinite, but that baseline $1 billion market, that's the reason.
Right. Well, so going back to the team, what are the things that help you come to the conclusion, this is the team that can make the pivots and adjustments necessary?
It's yes, this team can make the pivots and adjustments, and yes, this is a team that I want to work with for the next 10 years. And I think that was a sobering reality that as Steve and I first started working together, and then we started investing together, you look at the statistics of the average marriage in the U.S. and it's something like 7.5 years. And I'm like, we are getting into these relationships, not only as a partnership, as a fund with these limited partners, but also in these investments that we're making. We're getting into a relationship that lasts longer than the average marriage in the U.S. And so we've got to make those decisions wisely. And so going back, we like co-founder scenarios. Few and far between are the, Steve Jobs that have both the vision, the technical savvy, the ability to execute those sorts of things. So, we do. It's not a requirement, but typically we look favorably upon the one who can sell and the one who can build.
Got it.
And so those having those two elements there, I appreciate difference in perspective that you're bringing. You're not bringing just one lens to the business, that you can see things from multiple angles. There is, and again, in this space, some of the most, again, profound and successful founders have been dysfunctional. Like there's a level of dysfunction that, because I'm thinking like, well, do I need to look for dysfunctional people? Like, is that if we want to, experience these like exponential returns, do we need to just look for people that are not fun to be around and slightly dysfunctional? And we ultimately made that decision. No, that there are people that we would rather work with and that will build brilliant, amazing companies and not leave a wake, leave such a wake in their path, I guess. But yeah. So what we're looking for, what we like to look for, of course, is domain expertise. I love the word perspicacity, and it's funny because I've not met many people who know the word perspicacity, but we describe it as that kind of Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck is heading feature. Webster defines perspicacity as shrewd insight into something. And so it's you're a domain expert, you know where that market is going or that industry is going, and you can skate to where that puck is headed, not to where it currently is. So perspicacity, of course, grit is a pretty commonly talked about, but that's that there's a level of resilience in you as a human that you can keep going because the journey will get hard, because there will be times when you'll struggle to pay your people. And you may not pay yourself for a bit. And so founders that are willing to have the grit to go along that journey is reveals itself pretty early, but it's definitely an important factor that we look for.
Well, how do you evaluate, when you're dating, if you will, right, that someone has perspicacity and grit?
Right. Yes. It's easy. No big deal.
It's like, what's your weakness? I work too hard and I care too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think the domain expertise is much easier to analyze on the surface, because it's do you know the industry? That's one. But it's also interesting too, and I don't want to like cut my own knees out from underneath me, but it's also some of our most successful founders, it doesn't matter the industry you put them in. They can go to market with a product, and they just know that they know the motion that's required to just execute. One of our portfolio founders is she's building a cyber company, and she's like, I don't know cybersecurity. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but she's been adjacent enough to the needs of the industry where she's like, all right, let me bolster my team with cyber experts, and then I'm going to go to market with this product. And she's our front runner in the portfolio as far as success, raised an additional round of capital recently. And she's well on her way to another successful exit. So, so that's an element of it. So the domain expertise, whether it's industry or whether it's kind of the serial nature of the entrepreneur, and then the grit. Ask them tell me about your failures. Don't just tell me about your successes. It's like, it's just a getting to know you process. And how do we see beyond? And I don't say that kind of strange, but like see beyond even just the things that they're saying. And I think that grit is something that comes out naturally after a few conversations of getting to know somebody beyond the product that they're building.
How long does that process take usually?
I don't think we've ever been known for expediency of decision making, but I would say we've not made an investment in a founder that we've known for fewer than 3 months, probably.
Okay.
And that's, again, when you say that VC is a relationship-based business, especially when you're investing early, you're not taking the traditional markers of business success. You're not able to run a discounted cash flow analysis on the books. It's a different calculus that you're making. And so even for founders that, again, we've been in a period about a year of not having capital to deploy, so that as companies come in and say, hey, can we tell you about our business? I'm like, in all honesty, full transparency, we don't have capital to deploy, but we like to meet early. And being able to be introduced to you, the person, to you, the business, when we are sitting on that dry powder, able to deploy additional capital, it's those ones who had made an impression then that I'm most likely to come back to first and foremost, because again, there's some level of, 3 conversations in, it's like, that there's just a trust that's been established there.
Sure. Well, what about prior experience? How critical, or I should say, prior successful exits? How important is that? And if you were to look at the 20-ish companies you invested in, what percentage of those founders had some prior successful exit, and what percentage didn't, roughly?
Great question. I would say it's 20% have. So we've definitely invested in some non-traditional founders in that sense. A couple of very young founders, but and this is part of, again, what we would look for in a team is if you've not done this before, who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you listening to? And if there is experience and there's wisdom around you, then there's a level of comfort that we get to with, okay, this founder is listening to good people, or is willing to invite our team into the company a little more intimately, right? So whether that's an advisory board or technical role, and the others, and again, in the non-traditional kind of construction of our portfolio, we've got some companies that aren't pure startups. They've been in business and operations for 10, 15 years. They're just at a pivot point. It's like, hey, we did this line of business and it ran a good company for 15 years. But hey, wait, there's this opportunity in the market, and we need to bring a couple $1 million of fresh capital into the company. We're going to build on all these past successes, but then we are going to penetrate that market due in large part to our reputation in the industry, XYZ, whatever that scenario is. And so there's a level of experience there that may not have been a previous exit, but I think that you can help that successful CEO navigate those waters in a way that, and then again, that's what we're working towards is helping them navigate those waters, again, building on the back of a successful business they built.
So when I was in business school, my concentration was in entrepreneurship, and with one exception, none of the professors were entrepreneurs themselves, but I had one that was, and he was like the OG of entrepreneurs. He had run something like over 200 different companies, all relatively small. And what he did was he hired what he called like territory managers to manage like groups of 8 to 12 companies. And he had a very specific thing he was looking for. He wanted guys or gals who had, you know, finished high school. They were quite intelligent, but they'd never gone to college. They had to have a chip on their shoulder about it, which was interesting. People that really were trying to prove themselves, right? Yeah, I didn't go to Harvard, but I could have, or whatever. Sure. And then there were two things that he did to everyone before he would bring them on, because he would pay them a decent salary, but they would get a percentage of the profit from the group of companies that they manage. So they might get $100,000 salary, but their bonus could be $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever it could be. You know, so more money than someone without a college degree, especially back then, could make. This would have been in like 1994. And what he did was he would play golf with every one of them to see if they cheated, right? You know, did they count every stroke? You know, like I joke when I play with my dad sometimes. Like, he was like, oh, I'm laying 3. I'm like, 3? I saw you hit 6 shots myself. Okay, you're laying at least 7. So he would do that. And then the other thing he would do is the very last thing is he'd take them out to a fancy dinner, get them dressed up, and he would pay the waiter or waitress to dump water on them to see how they'd react.
I love that.
A little manipulative, perhaps.
Sure.
But how did they respond?
Sure.
And so I'm curious, how do you assess character? Long-winded way of me saying, how do you assess the character of the person that you're, thinking about going into business, getting married to for 7.5 plus years?
You know what I should do, and you've given me some great ideas moving forward. My husband is, again, a minister in the Christian church, and we have done some premarital counseling. And in both instances, or not, in each case, we either talk about ballroom dancing, we can teach them a few steps, or canoeing. And so I should take my founders either ballroom dancing or canoeing, because there's how do you work together? How are you gonna, as you drift off to the side, you start running into the bushes, like, are you getting angry at each other? Are you starting to throw things? Or are you actually going to work together to solve the problem? So, but I think your question was on character. So it's excellent. Again, just myself, Steve and Mort, who are the original general partners in the first fund. So the way that we would do that is again, having conversation. Meeting in person is huge, but of course we started our first fund in COVID era. And so meeting in person was not.
Oh, wow. That had to be interesting. Huh?
Right.
So you made investments in companies you never met the founders in person?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in 2 cases, both cases, they appeared on the Zoom screen, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. I don't think it ever came out of my mouth, but it was knee-jerk reaction of whatever you're selling, I'm buying. Like, there was a confidence, there was assuredness, and personability. But we're not talking like the WeWork guy. We're not talking people that just are like blowing smoke.
Right.
And it wasn't that they necessarily were the most articulate, but it was, and I hate to say it this way, Dave, because I think VCs even like garner the ire of other smart business people, just because they're like, there's a magic and you know it when you see it, and my gut is better calibrated than your gut. So that's not exactly what I'm talking about, because you go the next level. But I would say in those 2 very poignant cases of founders we invested in that we had not met in person, it was that conversation. It was the quality of the answers and the responses that we got to hard questions. And sometimes you ask the questions that you already know the answer to, as in, I hope this guy looks at me like I'm an idiot, because, of course, why would he be building this business if he didn't know the answer to it? Right. But then you ask the question anyway, just to see how they respond. And so for lack of a more concrete example, like dumping water on them at a fancy restaurant, it really is just through conversation and through intuition.
Yeah.
And again, I could go into a little bit the personalities of our teammates. So Mort's a CPA, Steve is an engineer, and I was voted best all around in my high school senior class. So I do have degrees. I am educated, but taking the 3 of our perspectives and triangulating on character, because Mort is analytically looking at something very differently. Steve is, again, analytically looking at things very differently. And there is a level of intuition that maybe it's as a mom that I have that allows, we've not been proven wrong yet, that we are, that we've been able to, to invest in great founders.
How many businesses did you look at to come on, to settle on 20?
Man, I wish, Dave, again, I wish I was more
Ballpark.
quantitative. Gosh, 20, 300 and 350 that we really looked at. I mean,
wow.
you're introduced to
Yeah.
thousands every year, you know,
Right.
whether it's just, you know, at a pitch competition, but
Right.
but once you begin a pattern of investing together, the signals that you know your team are going to respond to, they come out much more quickly.
Mhm.
And no offense to there's some dog walking apps that have made great money, but that's kind of my ingest. I say, like, I know that I'm not going to bring a dog walking app before my team. Like, that's just not what interests us.
Right.
But if we're talking about some sort of laser, or there's something in a sensor, again, this is where, you know, the hardware lean for our team has really come into play. Some sort of medical device. There's an area of expertise on our team that I very naturally connect the dots with. I'm like, oh, well, I remember Steve saying at one point, this operational amplifier that he built early on in his career has medical device applications. So he's going to know a lot about, or he's going to very well understand the product that this team is building, or that this market the company is going after. So I feel comfortable, definitely bringing those kind of deals before our team.
How common, if it happened at all, was it that you know, maybe two of the three of you felt a particular way about a founder, and the third, because I love the idea that, you know, you have the engineer, the accountant, and sort of the generalist. That's a really great, because you're going to see, like you said, you're going to see the world totally differently, which I could see the great utility in that. How common would it be that one of the three of you would point something out, maybe about the person, that the other two are like, oh, now that you say that, I didn't see that, but now that you say it, I see it. And you're like, let's not do that deal. How common was that?
Oh, it definitely happened. I again, just, I would say a handful of times in the course of us working together, where maybe we were all initially wowed at something,
right?
And then, you know, and again, there's smooth talkers. I mean, people that are professional pitchers, that have really honed the craft of perfecting the pitch. They can get that early funding, but there's next to no follow through. And then there's, and I think that's where the, you know, the statistics come out around number of hours of diligence in a company that equate successful decisions. And I think that's where you just pump the brakes for a moment and say, okay, on the surface, this is fantastic. All right, let's bring in additional bits of information. And again, with the skill sets, my first response is not, when I meet a founder, when I meet a company, is not to go and like research the market. I'm going to jump on LinkedIn and I'm going to say, do we know people in common? And then I'm going to go and see, who can I talk to that can validate this person is real, this person is legitimate.
Right.
How can I go to another human and glean information from their experience with this human? And again, my partners might go a little bit more into like, all right, well, what's the state of the robotics? And, you know, and they're going to dive into the information. They're going to investigate deeply the analytical side, and then we're going to take on, you know, the human element in a different way. But yeah, it has happened a few times where, yes, data point comes in and we're like, hey guys, have we considered? Did we think, you know, maybe this isn't squaring with what he or she said initially? And then we decided to walk away from a couple of deals.
Well, so good segue to this question, which we talked a little bit about green flags. What are the, you know, maybe 3 red flags where, like, if one of these 3 things has happened, we are not touching that deal?
Sure.
And not like about the market, more about the, you know, the deal or the person.
It's interesting because I struggled with this one early on, but my partner is very sensitive to founder salary. And I think that it has to do with his own experience of, you know, he founded several successful ventures and funded them himself. And so he understood, you know, there's a level of understanding of what it takes and what you're really sacrificing on, you know, especially at the outset. Not everybody can do that. And so I think that there's, that we have actually walked away from a couple of deals because the person was essentially wanting to make a job for themselves and move very laterally from the corporate position that they were in. And that is and again, that's very hard to recover from say just in Steve's perspective. It's like, hey, wait, you're going to raise $1.5 million and you're going to pay yourself 300,000 annually. He's like, not with my money.
Yeah.
Like we're investing in the company and you as the founder are a part of that. But if you're essentially making yourself a job and not willing to take the same like sacrifice and risk that we are taking as investors, and that's not a hard and fast number.
Yeah,
It's not, but
Right.
it's something that we're very sensitive to. We got burned on at one point where it didn't look like the founder was taking on paper in the line item that was founder salary. It was reasonable, not very much. But then when you get to year end, there were lots of other expenses that passed through the company that equaled founder salary or founder compensation that for the size of the company were completely unacceptable. And so we had to, we've unfortunately had to, to make some hard decisions on that front as well.
Right.
So I'd say founder salary.
That's a good one. That makes sense to me.
It also is a revealer.
Well, it's sort of like the counting all the strokes in golf. It's sort of like you're telling me you're not going to be that cost conscious if you're not willing to take some kind of haircut yourself.
Right. Right. And we understand that you must. It's that delicate balance between, yes, we want you to eat and feed your family, absolutely,
right,
without a doubt. And then there's also, but if that requires something that is unreasonable, then maybe founding a startup is not the right time for you right now. Like you need to just keep your job.
Right.
And that is, I would say, even again, going back to a founder characteristic where serving that kind of, I want to call it cold hard truth, I guess. If you're able to talk a founder out of starting a business, then they should not be starting a business, right?
Right.
Like if you are able to talk them out of it, like there's got to be the fire in the belly that that I'm going to do this with or without you. I'm going to make it work. And I think that again, your reasonable salary, I think is part of that as well.
Yep. What about humility in terms of how important do you think humility is when you're evaluating founders? Because I think there's a balance between you can't do something like be an entrepreneur without some ego.
Absolutely.
But untethered ego is problematic.
Absolutely. No, that's we live in a world, obviously, that rewards ego in large part. Those are the successful ones. I absolutely am I want to say susceptible to it, but there's a confidence that a person walks in a room and is like, I am going to do this thing. And you're like, I'll follow you wherever you go. Right. Absolutely. Right off that cliff, we'll construct that airplane on the way down. It does give everyone confidence. I think it does come out again through, and this is it's a interesting balance that you have to make of making an investment in a timely manner because the market opportunity in that window is typically very small, and getting to know someone well enough to know if they're going to be nightmares to work with and will run their entire team off in a few months. You've got to, we are working towards being able to find that balance. We have some expertise in-house and are moving in the direction of doing a lot of dual use investments out of our second fund. And, dual use is where there's typically a DoD or military or government application as well as a commercial application. And so we're finding that and again, living in Northwest Florida, there's a lot of separated, retired military, and that can often be 30 people that are 38, 39 years old that are getting out of the military, taking that expertise, wanting to flip into a commercial and or dual use scenario. So you've got that strong, hard-hitting, military style way of thinking, way of speaking, bringing that to market. Like there's, I've seen this in a couple of instances where it is so sure. Again, you probably know what I'm talking about. Where you're like they are so sure and so confident that this is where the way it's going to be, that you're like, okay, I can definitely see it. You have the inroads to that DoD client. And then you're tempering that with, are you capable of softening might not be the right word, but like modifying that bravado into a commercial message where you can not turn people off, but you can use that magnetism and charisma that you have to be able to really build something great and to be able to sell your product effectively. So
Yeah, I know my experience is when I ask people, because I evaluate deals all the time, and I'll be like, well, so how do you think this is going to play out? And they tell you how they think it's going to play out. And like you said, they should have a lot of conviction about that. But then if I'm like, well, great, sounds like that's highly probable. We all know nothing's certain. If that doesn't turn out, what do you
what's your
do
plan?
then? Yeah. And if their answer is, well, it's going to work out, I'm like, that's usually a red flag for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and similarly, I think the characteristics that we are looking for is like teachability or coachability. It's not to say that you have to that your company becomes subservient to what me, the VC, what I want your
Sure.
company to do, because that's not why you buy minority stakes in companies. You
Right.
leave that for the private equity guys, right? And so, but we want to come in and we want to support your venture. But if you've got it on lockdown, maybe you don't need my money, right?
Right.
Like maybe you don't need us to partner alongside with you if there's not any value that we can bring beyond the money.
Right.
And so, so I think teachability and coachability equals in a founder humility.
What about one of the things that I find is a good way to gauge whether someone's going to be a nightmare to work with or not? I'm curious if this factors into stuff. And although it does sound like you're working with perhaps maybe a little bit younger founders, is if someone's been at 5 different companies and they have people that are on their current team that have worked for them at 2 or 3 other companies, that's usually a huge green flag for me because one, they couldn't have been that big of a nightmare, they wouldn't keep following them.
Sure.
And 2, there's something about their leadership that if they're able to persuade them, that's helpful in terms of being able to persuade customers.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we do. We do have very mature founders as well. Like we've definitely invested in some people that that have been with their teams in a couple of instances where these companies are much more established. In one case, I believe the team has been together 35 years. And I think there's 6 or 7 of them that have gone through different iterations of different companies, primarily working on the same product towards the same goal. But there's just this deep, deep level of expertise. And like, to your point, that founder has been able to, I don't want to say bring them all along for the ride, but they have all worked in lockstep for that many years. And so, okay, for one, that's amazing. That's a great testimony to the founder. For 2, you ask the reverse question of, okay, well, why is this capital injection right now going to equal meteoric success when it's been, kind of chugging along with the same team, for the last few years. So it is interesting seeing it from both angles. But I definitely agree that if someone can, typically more than one person, I think maybe you can like dupe somebody into strong arm them into staying with you. But I agree, more than one person that they're saying, hey, we're going to get the band back together and we're going to do this thing. Absolutely. Especially when those other people have options.
Right.
They're like, they could be other places. And no, wait, it's such a good experience of working with this founder, working with this person that they're back in.
Well, Kelly, this has been really great. Where can people find you and find your fund and what you guys are looking to do?
Absolutely. So as we introduced the firm today, so we are Tech Farms Capital at techfarmscapital.com. That is where we are today as of time of recording. We are imminently rebranding the firm. We are going to be Gain Venture Capital. So gaincapital.vc is the domain where you'll be able to find our firm in the very, very near future. We are going to socially be primarily on LinkedIn. And so, again, Gain Venture Capital. And I'm Kelly at gaincapital.vc.
Kelly, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Dave.